This is what Steve Young told Tom Tolbert about Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance. We don't need camps of people. I'm with Jimmy. I'm with Trey. Like, stop. Guys are like, there's a tough league and you do move on. And when you move on, you move on. We get over that. But when you've got the red and gold on, stop. We're in it together. We don't find the mitigating circumstances. We're all in. We're all in with each other. So he doesn't like it's not about camps, he said. Not about camps. Everyone's on the same team.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to tell Steve. He went through this. It literally happened in the camp. It felt like you and I were so young, we just kind of taken it in off documentaries, but we're in the Joe camp because of what Joe had earned. And this situation, even though Jed has outspoken, does not parallel that situation literally at all. But
literally it does. There's two people.
There's two individuals from an accomplishment resume standpoint. And that
one of them is younger, one of them is a little older. See, a lot of similarities.
Yeah, I guess Steve was a high pick, but
Shanahan, Bill Walsh, geniuses.
Yeah, so I understand the splinter nature of a locker room being put in this situation. Like I think it's very easy for a guy, almost 60 years old to say that stuff. Very understandable for the 24-year-olds in the locker room to be a little confused. There was some teasing going on. There was an inability, which ended up potentially, we think, benefiting the 49ers holding on to Jimmy. But it also was ripe to create just some weirdness. We said it during training camp when he was eating in the cafeteria, right? Like most of these, it's funny. Whenever someone gets injured, like Jameis right now is injured. He's out. He hasn't practiced this week.
But he's in London.
Yes. And then I heard someone say, well, Andy Dalton's getting all the reps. And you just realize, like, so many teams, if I asked you to go through, like, you know exactly who Andy Dalton is, but you wouldn't have been able to tell unless you had, like, researched it or something. I would not have known what team Andy Dalton was on, right? And most of these situations are just like, there are a couple, like, I know Gardner Minshew is Jalen's backup, or Blaine Gabbert is Brady's backup. But and Cooper Rush, just because he played last year, but like the Andy Dalton types, they kind of just maneuver throughout the league, right? Like CJ Beathard was somewhere till he got hurt. Mullins, I think, is with the Ray. It's just once you kind of, I know Jordan Love's there, but there are just kind of random situations that are very independent of the starter. Like, I just think this guy was better, so we added him. Daniels has been there forever in San Diego or LA because they like him. Stafford's backup, no clue. Wofford, maybe. Is he still there? But if you told me it's like, they got a Nick Mullins type, I'd believe you. So it's just, you do think where the Niners, their situation was like the most polarizing in the league, even during training camp. He was literally, he's still there. So it's understandable why people just have some different takes. There'd be no take to be had if Jimmy had been cut, like I wanted to, like right when camp started, and Andy Dalton was still available, let's say, and they had added Andy Dalton. And it was like Andy Dalton, it was Trey Lance's backup. There would have been no splintering. No one would have wanted to see Andy Dalton. Trey broke his ankle, then Andy Dalton would have had to start. The only splintering would be like, time to see Purdy, But like part of the Jimmy Garoppolo is the conversation that creates splintering.
I'm with Steve. Like, in theory, it sounds great, but it's just at that position, it just doesn't, and he knows it. It just doesn't work that way. I think what should make it easy
happens a lot in college, doesn't it? The big programs when they've added a sweet guy and they kind of have an incumbent.
Yeah, guys' resumes are so short in college, right?
It's specific at like Ohio State or Georgia or something with a specific guy, right? Maybe an older guy who's a coach favorite, who's accomplished something, but then they get like Arch Manning or, Justin Fields is the backup. You're like, no, Jake Fromm went to war for us. He won 11 games. It has to be an elite program that just won 11, 12 games with the older guy that's clearly not as talented as like Quinn Ewers is here to take the job. Like, no way,
But there's a difference, right? Like, the difference is when some college sophomore thinks it versus, well, is it all the veterans who've been who are like 32 years old?
Not apples to apples, but my point is it happens consistently at that level with the blue chip guy at like 10 programs, right?
Yeah. But it's just not
it has Texas has it written all over them next year with Arch.
When whoever the coach is. but it's just the nature of the position. It just is. The thing that to me makes it a little wild, and we've talked about it, but all of this, started when they re-signed Jimmy, which is a situation they created. But it really hit the fan after Jimmy replaced Trey. Now, it started up, right? It started up before that. That's part of what led to the reaction after Jimmy replaced Trey, because Trey got hurt, not because Trey got benched. And I agree with Steve fundamentally. Like, if you run a team, you would not want Mike Silver to have a story that says some people in the locker room think Jimmy gives them a better chance to win right now. I agree. I agree. I think we've seen this 49er organization under Kyle is really buttoned down. There's not a lot of rumors. There's not a lot of leaks. And I do think it says something that even in that environment, there was just a little of that, because I think when it comes to quarterbacks, it's nearly impossible, because it's the only because I think
isn't it human nature though for there to be some question mark till someone proves something?
Totally. It's human nature. And I think most positions kind of think it's bullshit that quarterbacks don't have to compete in the same way they do, like every week. Like, I get replaced as like most positions, I just get benched. Nobody goes crying for me. Like, no, give him 3 more weeks. It's like, no, you can come back when you prove it in practice. Quarterback, for good reasons, doesn't quite work that way. And I think probably most position players don't, understand that there's a difference, but don't love that there's a different rule applied to them than the QBs.
Well, one thing last week was like, Lenore in the slot? What happened to Womack? And then I saw Kyle's quote after. It was like, he had a great week of practice. So
he was better.
He got lapped in practice, which is impossible at quarterback, right?
Yeah, you don't get there's no the reps. That's called a quarterback competition, and that's a problem. A nickelback competition, nobody calls it that. They're just like, yeah, they're playing.
Yeah, to me, it is what it is. I think the Eagles are a pretty good example. Going into the season, it was like, Roseman, if this doesn't go well, he's got multiple picks. They could always make a pivot to Gardner Minshew. 3 weeks in, Jalen's fucking looks awesome. Like, they got their quarterback, and it's just I haven't heard Gardner Minshew's name one time. I haven't heard anyone mention Roseman's loaded with picks. No one even. There's like, can we win the Super Bowl? Right? That's all that anyone's thinking. Like, is this guy good enough to win the Super Bowl with? A month ago, it was like, time will tell with just Jalen Hurts' character. Yeah. You can shut people up fast with good play. That's the one thing at football, because it's not like, well, he hit 2 home runs in 3 games and then he strikes out for the next 20 games. In football, you just play once and then you get a long break. Then you play once and you get another 6-7 day break. So it's just, you play well basically 80% of the time over a month. That's just kind of your narrative. You're just playing pretty good. Like, that's why, everyone was bullish on Jimmy, and then we saw it, we're like, oh, pump the brakes. But he can kind of 2 or 3 touchdowns this week, win by 10 points, everyone will be fine. Just the nature of football, right? I mean, it's just, it is what it is.
Corey on the stream says, if Jimmy stinks this season, maybe it was necessary. The team will no longer be able to win in spite of his shortcomings. Seems like a fitting ending to me. Yeah, if Garoppolo's bad this year, then we can debate whether or not Trey Lance will come back better or whatever. But the question then becomes, I just don't assume that Kyle Shanahan is giving anybody anything moving forward, right? If Jimmy Garoppolo's bad and is gone, it doesn't mean that Kyle's just giving the job to Trey Lance again. Who the hell knows what he's going to do?
Yeah.
Which I think it was the point.
Well, I think regardless what happens with Jimmy Garoppolo, everything's on the table moving forward, right? That's what I believe. Everything's on the table. Yeah. To think that he just handed a job and it kind of got weird. I'm not saying he's not going to be the starting quarterback, but I wouldn't sign a Sharpie on that right now.
Well, I mean, he always said they drafted Trey because Jimmy got hurt a lot. Well, Trey's hurt now, so he will bring another quarterback in that he thinks, even if Trey Lance is a starting quarterback, he will want a quarterback that he feels comfortable putting on the field if he has to put him on the field.
Will Levis?
I don't think Will's going to be available, John.
No, I don't either.